All right, and welcome back. I am Dave Lewis, Global Advisory CISO here at 1Password, and I'd like to welcome you all back for this edition of the Chasing Entropy Podcast. With me this week are Runa Sandvik, and I would thank you very much for being here. I really do appreciate the opportunity to speak with you, and it bothers me that it has actually been so many years since we were last in the same room, which is kind of surreal when you blink and here you are.
It is great to
Welcome.
see you. Thank you for having me. And yes, I think it's probably been 6 years, seven plus. It's
And
a long
actually,
time,
it is a long time, but on the same token, it feels like it was a blink of an eye, and here
pretty
we
much.
are. And
Yes.
that really is somewhat discombobulating, to say the least. There, I actually got that word in there. I should have given myself a prize for that one. So your career has been nothing short of amazing to watch, and it is really something that I think more people should be aware of that are in our industry. And the reason I say that, because one of the things that I find, and we were talking about this earlier, is that a lot of people that are in the industry have only been here for a couple of years. So it is a growing field in a lot of ways, but there's a lot of new folks that are coming into the landscape. So can you give me a little bit of a background on your journey into cybersecurity and how you got here from, back in the days of Oslo?
Sure. Let's see. So I grew up in Oslo, Norway. Then I think when I was like 15, got my first computer and found cybersecurity or hacking very, very interesting. I find it very challenging. There were a lot of really interesting puzzles in that space, and something that I really wanted to learn more about. And so from there, I got a bachelor's in computer science in Trondheim. And around the same time that I was completing my bachelor's, I started working for the Tor Project, it's a
Mhm.
US nonprofit, as part of Google's Summer of Code. So Google will effectively fund open source projects and then allow them to take on summer interns. So I was a summer intern for Tor in 2009. And from there, I stayed on, I volunteered, I kept maintaining the project that I had worked on over the summer. And then over time, then was offered a part-time contract and later on a full-time contract. So I ended up working for the Tor project for I think about 4 years
Mhm.
total. And I think the just looking at what I'm doing today, it was really the work for the Tor project that I think just like helped like pave the way for it. Because I ended up doing a lot of different types of work from QA development, project management, translation, support, outreach, and really then got to like really figure out what is it that I enjoy doing, what is it that I am good at doing, what is the sort of work that is challenging enough to keep me interested, and then
Mhm.
also find ways to use the skill set that I have and the things that I'm really passionate about to also help other people. And so it was sort of through the work with Tor that I got to sort of see that investigative reporters do need a lot of help with cybersecurity as well. And like there's a lot of work that can go into helping them do the work that they need to do, but in a safe way. And
Mhm.
so really a lot of what I do today really came from the years with Tor.
Very cool. So you did do some time with the New York Times as well. And during your time there, you set up a confidential tip line for whistleblowers. Do you want to speak to the challenges of trying to set something like that up in, well, today's landscape, such that it is?
Sure. Yeah. So I was with the New York Times from 2016 to late 2019. So I was the head of cybersecurity for the newsroom. So the company has a security team, and there's a CISO and analysts and pen testers and people focused on compliance. And then my role was specifically focused on then securing the newsroom.
Hmm.
And back in 2016, there wasn't really a good way for a member of the public to securely or anonymously contact a journalist at the New York Times. At that point, you sort of had to either like have an existing relationship with a journalist there, or you had to first figure out who you wanted to contact, and then you had to figure out how to securely get in touch with them. Do you email them? Do you send them a letter? Do they have signal? How do you get the phone number? How do you do any of this without along the way effectively leaking that you are now trying to get in touch with this journalist at the New York Times? So we then looked at what are different tools that are in use today to securely communicate, and tools that can be used within a newsroom to allow the public to securely and anonymously submit information. And so we then set up, back then it was Signal, WhatsApp, Secure Drop, which was developed and maintained by Freedom of the Press Foundation, postal mail, regular email, and also encrypted email. And then internally built a system that would uh, collect all the tips from all of those channels in a way that was easy to review and vet and sort of manage and work on moving forward. So in many ways, that system, that channel gave then the public a way to reach the newsroom at the New York Times, knowing that someone would actually look at the information that came in. So potential sources don't have to like go and sort of chase down the signal number for a journalist. They can just use Secure Drop to send whatever info they have.
Nice. I wonder what the signal to noise ratio was like for that one, but that's another story for another time, I'm sure. So,
There's actually a study that was done years ago. I think it was out of the House Center for Journalism at Columbia. If I remember correctly, it was an interview that was done with a handful of media organizations, just asking like, is this thing actually helpful? Like, you have Secure Drop,
mhm,
you've had it for a period of time. Is it helpful? And certainly there are people that receive cat photos and other types of photos, but that do say that in between all the spam, there's definitely enough tips coming in that make that worth it.
very cool. Well, that's
Yeah.
good then. So, as somebody that's been, deeply involved with protecting journalists and at-risk individuals, what sort of collaboration between cybersecurity professionals and media it play in today's landscape? So, it's what is advice that you could provide on how that could be better put together? Because I see a lot of initiatives being spun up, and some of them are very good, and other ones don't seem all that effective. So, I would imagine that you have some pretty good guidance on that front.
Which ones? So, like when you're saying some that are effective, can you give some examples?
I'm not going to name names because
Okay.
I don't want to seem like I'm favoring one group over another.
I'm just trying to make sure I understand the question.
Yeah, no, I just like I see groups of security professionals that are coming together to do, try to do really good things of, getting the message across to, government bodies to deal with protecting journalists, things like that. Like, what is effective? Because I personally have tried to do work with government bodies, as an example, like in the UK government. I was brought in to help with a project, and unfortunately, the person who was in charge of that project went on sabbatical and never heard again. So it's like I there are individuals in the industry that want to help
Yeah,
and don't necessarily have the wherewithal or the understanding of how they can get that done or do so effectively. So along
gotcha.
that lines.
Okay. I think there's a few different options. So I think it is certainly getting to know journalists who do like really important work and do work that you care about. And certainly a way to support them, to help them if they need something, if they have questions about how to do something securely, how to use a certain tool. You can certainly then like over time like build a personal relationship and sort of become their like go-to for tech security stuff. If you want to, I think, scale the type of support that you provide to journalists, building relationships with the IT and security teams at media organizations is, I think, a much better way to go, or building relationships with the people that support journalists. So Freedom of the Press Foundation, there's people at the EFF, myself, Internews as a team working on journalist security stuff, and then helping ensure that they have the tools and the resources and the knowledge that they need to provide support to journalists as well. So there are different ways that you can like do outreach, you can scale it up, you can provide tools or products. I know 1Password provides free licenses to journalists. Ubico has been providing keys to journalists for years for free as well. And that's certainly one way that like companies are helping investigative reporters without necessarily being in direct contact with them.
Good point. And to the point that you brought up there about 1Password for journalists, I will include that in the show notes as well. So thank you for highlighting that particular one. And also for anybody that uses that, if you could give us some feedback as to how well we're doing or ways we can improve, we're always open to hear that sort of thing as well. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't bring up the obvious security research piece that was in the headlines for quite some time, where you did some research on vulnerability on smart rifles. And I got to be honest, up until the time that you did this research, I didn't even know this was a thing, although I should have assumed, I guess. But how did this project come about, and what are some of the broader lessons from cybersecurity that we can take away from your findings into this research on smart rifles?
Yeah, that was a very different, very random project compared to, I think, everything else that I had done up until that point, and probably also to this day. Um, it came about when my husband took me to a gun show in Washington D.C. And this company from Texas, Tracking Point, had a booth showing off this rifle. So it's a standard Remington rifle, standard or slightly modified scope that has a little computer inside of it. It's like a Beagle Bone Black, and a connection that goes to the trigger, because the whole idea with this rifle is that there's a button by the trigger that allows you to tag your targets. And once you've tagged your target, the trigger is locked until the computer has decided that if it releases the trigger at this point in time, you will hit the target that you've tagged. So it's really like sniping for dummies. And so they were talking about like how like amazing this rifle is, and how like fancy it is with the technology, and how it has USB ports, Wi-Fi, software updates, mobile apps. And at that point, I got really curious. I was sort of thinking about, okay, well, if you have all of these technologies that are supposed to be used a certain way, are there ways that you can use it in unintended ways, right? And on the way home, I just said like, hey, let's buy one and hack it and present at Black Hat and DEF CON next year. And my husband said, sure. So we did, and we had this rifle sitting on the kitchen counter for probably 8 months, like open, cables out, battery connected, laptops connected, just trying to figure out like some way to gain access to the file system.
And you obviously gained that access.
Eventually, I think it was closer to our presentation than I would have liked. But like that's sort of how it goes, right?
Oh yeah.
Um, but yeah, so we got full access to the file system. So we were able to then create custom software updates. We were able to lock the trigger, so you can't fire at all. We cannot fire remotely, but we can lock it, and we can certainly also change the values associated with the bullet that is in the chamber, so that when the rifle is trying to figure out when to release the trigger, or when the scope is trying to figure out when to release the trigger, you'll end up shooting 2.5 feet to the left or to the right of your intended target. So basically,
Wow.
you'll miss and potentially hit something else. Um, and we did try to work with the vendor. We did let them know about the issues that we had found and about the presentation ahead of time. They initially seemed open to working with us. Then they wanted us to sign an NDA to never speak about the research ever again. We said no, so the conversation ended there. And by the time we gave our talk at Black Hat in 2015, the official like company statement said that it's safe to continue using the Wi-Fi on your rifle as long as you're confident there are no hackers within 100 feet.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I did not expect to
So,
hear that today.
oh, it was great. So, but that was 2015. And certainly there's been a pandemic and a whole lot of other stuff has happened since. But I am trying to figure out what kind of fun stuff I want to tackle for hopefully for this year.
Okay, I'm dying to know. Did you try to load Doom on it?
Did not. No. Maybe
'Cause
we should. Maybe that should be like a, you know, 10 years, 11 years later.
there you go. I did actually see a publication the other day where somebody got to run Doom in a PDF. So the challenge has been made.
Yeah, I did not know that was possible.
Neither did I. I was actually quite caught off guard by that one. So when you look at this, it was running an operating system on a rifle. Having been using rifle sports or involved in rifle sports myself, I've never had anything with any sort of technology built into it other than the scope. But that was a bit of a jarring one because the whoops factor of what if somebody did something wrong. And when I pivot and look towards the wider industry of people in enterprise security having to deal with shadow IT, like organizations around the world, they have controls in place from a technological perspective. They have policy issues that or policies they've put out to deal with shadow IT, but it still exists. Like my favorite one, I gave a talk in Toronto not too long ago. I polled the audience and I said, how many people have technical controls or policy controls for shadow IT? They all put their hands up. Then I paused for a minute and I said, all right, how many people have shadow IT? All the exact same hands went up. So other than being Schrodinger's IT security problem, it really speaks to the conversation of, given your experience in the high stakes environments like newsrooms and things to that effect, how do you see shadow IT manifesting in organizations and how big of a risk does it pose?
I think shadow IT appears in at least two cases. One is when there's really no IT, right? So when you're
Yeah.
going from sort of a smaller organization and you start growing and everyone's just like trying to get the work done. And there's a lot of like personal accounts, personal devices. You're not yet at a point where you have like, a corporate Google workspace or you have like a company plan for Slack where like you don't have those pieces in place. So certainly everyone's like trying their best and everyone's being their own IT person at the same time. I think the second one is then cases where you do have IT, but IT is not meeting the needs of the organization, where there's too much friction, where
Mm.
either the tools provided don't quite do what people need them to do, where IT is too slow to respond or just not seen as helpful. Ultimately, people want to get their work done. And if the
Right.
tools are provided, if the devices that they have, if the support that they're getting is just not sufficient to meet the needs that staff have, I think those are cases where people will just like go off and start doing their own thing. And that's usually when you have like shadow IT challenges. And so I think one way of like trying to navigate it is to really understand like what are the needs of the different teams within your organization and can the IT team currently meet those needs?
And to build on that a little bit further, is like how can you foster that culture where employees actually feel encouraged to use the approved tools or at least go through the process, and everybody loves process, rather than resorting to shadow IT, because I'm perfectly guilty of having done that far too many times in my career, and it was never out of a sense of malice. It was always I had to get something done. And it's sort of like the cobbler's children. Everybody has great looking shoes, but the cobbler's children not so much. And how do we get that message across in a way that is empowering to folks to be able to say, yes, I need help with this, or no, these tools aren't really getting it done for me?
I think that comes down to, are you actually asking staff what they need, or are you telling them what they can have? So
Mm-hmm.
to what extent do staff feel like they're going to be heard if they speak up? To what extent do they feel like they're going to get help if they ask for it?
Yeah.
And also, I think there's also like a conversation to be had about like why you should be using the company tools. Like, what's the reason for it? I think a lot of people don't necessarily understand, because if you don't really have a good understanding of like why you should be doing it a certain way, then it's really easy to just go do it differently if, to your point, the goal is just to get your work done. But if, for example, you know that using the company tool gives you greater protections from a privacy, legal, and security standpoint, then maybe that is enough of a driver for you to be like, okay, I am going to use this tool, but here's the problem that I'm having with it. So now I'm going to ask for help with it. So I think there can also sort of be that like awareness and sort of like education piece to help people understand exactly why we say please do use the company approved tools.
Excellent. So you do a lot of work, well, obviously, with journalists at risk individuals, as we were talking about earlier. But when it comes to challenges posed by shadow IT, what kind of parallels do you see between individuals and groups that need digital security? And I don't know how to better phrase that, actually. Because the individual and the group are not necessarily one for one, right?
Yeah, I think one challenge that a lot of media organizations have, and it's not certainly not unique to media, but um, typically the IT and security teams, their responsibility is protecting the company. So all the corporate's accounts, devices, systems, networks, all the company assets. But being a journalist is also an identity. You're a journalist 24/7. You're a journalist when you're on your personal X account or on Blue Sky or on Facebook, or when you're sending an email from like your personal email, or you're on your phone, which is most likely your personal phone. Protecting a journalist and helping them work safely needs to then also extend to what they're doing on any personal devices with any personal accounts. And so that's sort of usually where you have this like friction with corporate IT and security teams, because again, their remit is company stuff, not personal stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But I think in this day and age, there is quite an overlap between company and personal for different groups of people, including journalists. And I think that the work then needs to take that into account.
Yeah, that's fair. The lines have absolutely blurred. I remember at one company I was working at a long time ago, when Twitter was in early days before it disappeared from the universe. We'll just pretend it never exists anymore. But it was amazing because what would happen is the page would refresh every couple seconds to give you the latest. And the person who was in charge of physical security at our company saw this on one of the monitoring systems and said I had launched a denial of service attack because it was updating every few seconds. And I'm like, are you out of your flipping gourd? But again, this was a communication thing that needed to happen. And you're right. There's just so many times where you'll see companies say, okay, the rule is this, without the background, the understanding of the human element of why we got to that particular decision. So your work focuses really on the intersection of technology and human rights in a lot of ways. So what kind of advancements do you think in that automation and AI, yes, I said it, there you go, drink, will impact privacy and security for at-risk populations?
Oh, um, I will say, like, we're at this point where everyone is trying to figure out what to do with AI. Like, how
Yeah.
do we leverage it? How do we make a product with it? How do we benefit from it? What do we do? And there's this race to be first to do something cool with it.
Mm-hmm.
race to try it out. There's a race to figure out like what this thing can do for you. And with just like with any other type of like new exciting tool or type of technology, the conversations around what this using this tool mean for my privacy and my security is not necessarily the sort of number one question that people have.
Yeah.
And so there's sort of that same conversation around like, yeah, you've just recorded an interview with a source who said some stuff you want to quote, but also said some stuff that was just on background, and maybe also said some stuff that you just can't share with anyone at all. That may not be the recording that you want to upload to some like AI transcription service.
Very
But
true.
unless you've had the conversation about why maybe that's not a good idea, that may not be like a top of mind topic. It may not be something that you necessarily consider. And so definitely seeing sort of the same like questions and concerns pop up in like the space that I work in, which is sort of like same as any other company, right? What do we do about all of these like AI transcription bots, meeting bots? Um, yeah, what should our policy internally be for this thing?
Yeah, excellent. And the other thing too that a lot of people don't realize is, like you said earlier, journalists really do tend to be journalists 24/7. And I have quite a few friends who are journalists, and I always find myself being careful what I say. And like I love them to death, but it's just I have learned that not always is there's no such thing as off the record with an ed journalist, even as and even with my friend group. Um, that's one of the things that I think we need to impart to people is to understand that when you're speaking to the media, that anything you say can and will probably end up on the front page.
Potentially.
Uh,
I mean, I think
potential.
companies do have media training,
Hmm.
which is helpful.
Yes. And there are times where I've been in organizations where it was very good. Obviously, your mileage will vary. I've seen organizations where the training was not good at all. Um, so when we're looking at things like we've been talking about, various cybersecurity threats, shadow IT, privacy, and all these things, as we look ahead, crystal ball time, what sort of things do you think deserve more attention when we're talking about cybersecurity challenges? Like, yes, everybody's in the AI gold rush. Not too many years ago, it was the cloud gold rush. What are the real practical things that people need to be paying attention to, not only as organizations but as individuals, as opposed to, oh, look, let's put AI on everything?
I think it still comes down to making sure that you have like the foundation in place.
Mhm.
Because, like, yes, we're talking about AI and how do we use it and should it be allowed internally and when do we use it, when do we not use it. But ultimately, that is a conversation around what kind of tools that we as a company want to use. And should there be a policy around it? And how do we enforce it? And what kind of training do we put in place for staff relating to this tool? So, like, yeah, today that thing is AI, and in a year from now, it could be something totally different. But the need for process and awareness and training and policy enforcement internally remains the same. And so I think like definitely still considering like foundational IT security, like building blocks. Uh,
Mhm.
we haven't really shifted away from that. I don't think that those are going to go away anytime soon. So like that is still where the focus needs to be, even if, again, the thing that we're talking about is AI.
100% agree. And now, was Clippy the first AI?
Probably. Probably.
Oh, wow. So this has been awesome. I really do appreciate you taking the time today. But one of the things that I was somewhat remiss on at the beginning was talking about what you're doing for a living now. You're the founder of Granite, and can you tell us more about that?
Yeah. So after leaving the Times in 2019, I started doing similar work, consulting for other media organizations, other groups of at-risk people, and eventually a friend of mine was like, "Hey, Runa, why don't you just start a company? Because this is what you do, and this is what you want to be doing. So just start a company doing that." So that is Granite. So still doing cybersecurity for journalists and other groups of at-risk people with the one goal of helping them do their work safely. And so while again, my background is primarily cybersecurity, I do really try to take into account like what will this person or this team need to do this thing securely, whether it's just be more safe day to day, if it's a work for a specific project or preparing for a certain trip. What is it that this person needs from a digital, physical, legal, and emotional standpoint to be able to safely do the work that they want to do? So that is what I do today.
Very cool. And I'll be sure to add that into the show notes so people know how to find you. Thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. And hopefully I'll be able to see you again in the desert of the real at some point, because it has
Thank you.
been far
Yes.
too long.
It'd be
All
great.
right.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for tuning in. I'll talk to y'all soon. Cheers.